If you cut this statement, I think it's actually fine. So if we do Catalyst was problematic because it was able to be stacked to provide quickness while sacrificing a very low amount of damage, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. I'm there with you all the way, ArenaNet. We're running together through the fields, holding hands. I'm totally with you. But this statement is where the problems come in. It's a little disconnected from reality, if I'm gonna be honest here. The biggest loser in this patch was Warrior. By far. Not even close. Like, no one got screwed as much as the Warrior mains. And again, you can actually see this. So you can see here that it's slowly going down as people get ready for the banner nerf. And then when it actually gets nerfed, people just literally stop playing Warrior, right? We'll just stop playing, right? We go from 7% and then we go directly to 1%. Like, that is how much worse Warrior basically became overnight because of this change. This should not have made it to the game. This is probably one of the worst design choices I have ever seen ArenaNet make. All right then, gamers. It's about time. We have the balanced design notes for the profession updates. Will we see 5% crit in arms justified? Will we see a tenacious defense of the patch? I don't know. Let's get into it. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at what we got here. So, critical chance spotter and fury. When playing a power build, a major component of your damage output is in getting your critical chance capped at 100%. True. One major goal for this update is for the same build and equipment to work both in and out of organized play. This is actually an excellent goal. That's a very good goal. I like that. And to be honest, the changes actually do kind of go in that direction. With more fury and some more crit chance across the board on some traits there. Nice. Although, well, a little bit more on that later. Shall we say, incomplete in a lot of in a few areas, and that's something we'll get into in a moment. Unique stacking bonuses to attributes, especially precision, have been a problem here. Their existence means that while playing in coordinated groups with spotter or banner discipline, your critical hit chance is almost 10% higher than when playing alone. This is true. And here's the problem here. They removed all of these buffs, but didn't actually really compensate power builds, right? You lose your power, your ferocity, your precision. You lose frost spirit, right? All this kind of stuff. And they didn't compensate power builds for this. So what they've said here is that, yeah, now your build works in organized or unorganized play, but it's also worse. And it's relatively worser than if you were playing a combi build. This is the objection to this. Like, this statement on its own is good. In general, I think unique modifiers, yeah, sure, they can be a little confusing, particularly if they're very boring, right? Like, banners and spirits are dull. They just, like, put them down, boom, done. Very uninteresting. The issue that is going to be a bit of a theme here is that power builds have actually been underperforming a fair bit, specifically in Fractals, for a good chunk of time now. Certainly, well, that's not actually true. Like, Power Virtuoso and Power Mech are pretty good right now. So there are a few power builds, but should we say certain power builds that people really like Hollowsmith, like Weaver, right? Like Dragon Hunter, right? Like, really underperforming. And they didn't really get anything back. Like, those builds were already kind of a little bit lower than where they really want to be. And this patch just like, just slap them in the face, right? Just like, ugh! And there wasn't really any kind of compensation for that, right? Which kind of sucks if you're into that kind of playstyle. We saw an opportunity here to make progress on one of our long-standing goals, raising the floor on player effectiveness and damage output without further raising the ceiling, right? So this is an excellent goal, actually. Yeah, Reaper or even Daredevil, right? This is a really good goal. I am very much in favor. I think making the skill floor lower, right? And allowing players to be more effective while also not touching the skill cap is really good. The problem is that they kind of did touch the skill cap here a little bit in some areas that is very upsetting to players. But let's get into it. These unique stacking attribute bonuses are being changed to provide boons instead. We're making the critical hit chance from them much more accessible by increasing the critical hit chance bonus from the Fury boon from 20 to 25% in PvE, and by adding an additional 5% critical hit chance to many professions traits. So, okay, this is going to be a bit of a nitpick. They should have gone overboard on this, right? Because there are already quite a lot of power builds that genuinely have a bit of difficulty crit capping. You know, even in like the old edition, right, where you have Spotter and you have banners, you still had problems crit capping, even with all of that. It was like very, very tight. You'd have to go assassin's pieces sometimes. I think they should have gone overboard. We have dragon stats, but it's really hard to fit dragon stats in because, again, you know, you don't have the crit cap to really do that. There aren't that many builds. And a lot of the builds they want to provide, boons, need to run Diviner gear. And that means, again, you lose a lot of critical hit chance by going for Diviner. So you get punished really hard by not having crit cap and not having enough precision. And this is compounded by the fact that power builds typically underperform right now anyway, specifically when it comes to applying boons. So again, this change is in the right direction, but it's almost not quite there, right? It's like they've looked at it and they know what needs to be done, but they haven't really committed to it enough to really get what they want to do done, right? You know, yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a meme. Your critical hit chance will be higher in most content as Fury is stronger and is becoming more accessible. This is true. They actually made a lot of changes across the board. And I'll just kind of summarize this section. I actually really like this stuff here. They give like loads of free Fury share when you just play DPS builds, and loads of free might as well. I actually really like this. I think this is really cool. I like the idea that DPS builds have a bit more versatility. However, I also, look, I hate to be that guy, but I've got to criticize the design. Now, basically all three of these traits are almost identical, right? Because they are literally the same thing. When you get a crit, you give AoE Fury. They're all the same trait. And this is actually a bit of a running theme here that, again, I would heavily criticize with this patch. Spotter and Assassin's Presence are literally the same trait, right? Literally the same trait. Empower allies and what is it called? Pinpoint distribution on engineer. They are exactly the same trait now. Exactly the same trait now. We have the signet trait in Guardian, righteous inscriptions. A permanent inscription is exactly the same thing as the Elementalist trait in Earth, right? I think that's just kind of not that fun, right? Why do we have total duplicate traits? That kind of defeats the point of traits if you're just going to have clones of them. And indeed, kind of clones of abilities. It's just not really where you want to be, in my opinion. However, I do agree with the goal. I just disagree with the implementation here. I think the implementation could be far, far better, right, with this stuff. And yeah, the uptimes are not supposed to be 100%. They're supposed to be like kind of in the range of 50%, which I think is fair, right? Unless you commit to the boon, you're not going to get 100%. Well, unless you're playing Firebrand, I guess. But yeah, you get the picture. You get the picture. These traits will allow damage-oriented builds for these professions to help support nearby allies by ensuring high Fury uptime, keeping critical hit chances high. In addition, Rangers and Revenants can choose to tap into Fury with reworked versions of Spotter and Assassin's Presence, which will now apply Fury to yourself and allies when entering combat, and every 10 seconds thereafter when you remain in combat. The other really big problem I have here with this stuff, it's extremely passive and uninteractive, right? You're just pulsing Fury and Might every 10 seconds while you have these boons. It's like, why, right? Why is it like that? Okay, I think in general, rework the traits, right? Make them into something new. And you might say, oh, but that's a lot of work. And I would agree. I actually think that balance is really hard and it is a lot of work. But in that case, delay the patch a little bit or don't touch this stuff until you're ready to actually replace it with good design, right? Like, this is a really big issue I think ArenaNet did. I mean, what comes to mind is the 300-second PvP traits. In PvP, there are a whole bunch of traits that are typically passive procs, like a passive Endure Pain, for example, in the Warrior Defense trait line, that instead of kind of like redesigning them, ArenaNet made them awful. They said, we're going to make them 300 seconds. And the goal then was to say, well, we're going to rework them later on. And yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, sure. We want to delete that and then rework it later. I think it's been 2 years. Maybe that's a bit too harsh. So it's been at least over a year since that happened. Maybe like a year and a half. Something in that kind of range. And those traits are still in the game exactly as they were, right? This is a bit of a problem. I think that when we're kind of compromising design and making some very serious design compromises with our ability and trait design and kind of leaving it that way, I don't think that's very healthy for the game. And that's something that, again, I hate to say this, it's not being addressed here. And this, regrettably, I regret to say this is going to be a bit of a theme as we go through this post. A lot of the actual design problems with this patch are outright ignored. They do not even get mentioned, right? And that's going to be something that you're going to hear me repeat as we go through these notes, is that they'll talk about balance, but they won't talk about design. And in my opinion, design is actually extremely important. It's equally as important as balance, if not arguably more important. I think if the game is well designed, but a little bit imbalanced, you can deal with that. However, I think if a game is badly designed and the abilities aren't fun and aren't enjoyable to use, then I think you have a very major issue there, in my opinion. There you go. If you find you're lacking fury, there'll always be ways to shore it up, and it should become much more commonplace when you're playing with someone else nearby. Might is the other half of this equation. Until now, the burden has been squarely on the shoulders of heal support builds. By adding more incremental sources of might, we're aiming to take some of this reliance off healing builds and ensure smoother and more consistent might uptime whenever multiple layers together. Yeah, sure. I think that's fine. You know, they actually nerfed Druid for this, which is kind of a, whatever. Okay, but sure. Right, we're getting into this. So Rifle now got Might on blows. I actually like this. You know what? I'm going to give credit where it's due. I like giving Might to some weapon abilities, like Blunderbuss on Rifle, or Tides of Time on Chronomancer. I think that's really cool. Especially if they maybe looked at the Chaos trait line again as well. Yeah, I'm actually about that. I like that they also buff Thrill of the Crime, so Alack Spectre kind of pulses this 5-stack of permanent might at the same time. Yeah, these are all actually really cool changes, and it will certainly raise the floor in a big way, just kind of when you're playing like just regular gameplay, pugging, right, or just doing some like open world content, right, all that kind of stuff. Now, yeah, the issue is it's maybe not quite far enough. There aren't quite enough classes that do this to really kind of totally offset it away from healers. I think that's fine. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think having a support kind of have a bit of dedicated might uptime, I think that's all right. I think that's part of the build. That's fair enough. So yeah, in general, I'm kind of okay with this philosophy. I'm okay with this idea. Fractal Masteries and the Mist Offensive Potion. When playing Fractals, it's well advised to use consumable Mist Potions for bonuses to tackle higher tier bosses. True. The offense potion increases all damage you deal. However, the Fractal Achievement Masteries also cause the consumable Mist Potion to transform your agony resistance into attributes. With these masteries, the Mist Offense Potion also increases your precision. This causes a similar problem to other unique precision effects, as it means that to optimize your critical hit chance in Fractals to effectively play power builds, you'll want to have a different lower amount of precision on your equipment than playing elsewhere. Since Fractals will be impacted by other critical strike chance changes, we're changing the attribute bonus of the Fractal Achievement Masteries to give the offense potion vitality instead of precision. So here's the problem with this. Like, this is looking... I'm trying to be charitable here, okay? But I'm looking at this, and it looks like the devs are looking at this the wrong way around. What I'm trying to get at here is that they've misdiagnosed the problem here to an extent, right? They've said that the problem is that players are getting more value out of their power builds by doing this. Instead of saying, power builds seem to have a bit of problems, have a few problems in Fractals and don't seem to perform super well in pug groups, unless you kind of go through a lot of hoops and you know, everyone plays together. Like, this is not a very good way of looking at it. And their solution here is to basically nerf this. They've basically said, we're going to nerf power builds in Fractals, because that's what that is. This is like you know, obviously a Condi build does care about precision a little bit, right? Obviously, you know, you might have an on-crit trait that applies more conditions, and hey, free vitality is free vitality. I actually don't mind this. I don't mind the fact that having extra health. I think that's good. I'm all for it. I think it actually really helps, particularly squishier builds like a Catalyst or a Weaver, survive a little bit better in high-level Fractals. Yeah, sure. I'm down with it. I think that's great. Great change. You know, to give players a little bit more tankiness there. Fine. However, I think it really feels bad, man, if you're essentially losing a huge amount of offensive stats, right? If you're a power build, you're losing a lot of damage potential with this change. And you're not really getting it back, right, either. They aren't giving it back. They said we were maybe thinking about giving ferocity. I think, actually, arguably, I would just give ferocity, right, in this situation. Because, again, power builds in Pug play typically underperform. The meta is very dominated by condition damage builds in Fractals right now in Pug groups. I think they could have just given it ferocity, to be honest, right? You know, like, they could have done that, I think. It's sort of an opportunity to help ease some choke points within Fractal progression. One such choke point is at tier 3. Oh, they know. This is the point where many Fractals collected enough master points to progress Fractal achievement. Difficulty of the content has begun to climb, and potion use commonly begins, especially as some can be acquired for free daily with recommended Fractals of a lower tier. By adding Vitality onto the mastery bonus to the offense potion here, we introduce an additional source of health that can smooth out progression and help teach the necessity of Fractal potions in higher tier Fractal play. Right. Now, I do have a little bit of a problem here. I don't like Fractal potions. And maybe this is a hot take in the Fractal community, but I think it's kind of annoying for new players. I think it's confusing for new players. And it also means that devs have to balance around it, right? Like, it's all having like a permanent infinite modifier essentially means that you always have to assume the player has that. Because if you don't, then the content is way too easy, right? Because, you know, if you go, oh, the player always does 15% more damage, well, then you have to increase the boss's HP by 15%, right? At this point. Because if you don't, well, then the boss has just got 15% easier, right? And obviously, ArenaNet don't want to do that, right? They want to make sure that the content is challenging and engaging, so they have to design around that, right? And it's the same thing with the defense potion, right? And also with the utility potion, with the evasion potion. They have to assume you can dodge so much, right? Because you have the 50% or so endurance regeneration bonus on the utility potion, and they kind of have to assume that you have that. Otherwise, the content's going to be too easy. You know, it won't be forcing you to dodge enough. So mechanics like this, I tend to think aren't really good or healthy, right? They're just weird gimmicks that just slightly overcomplicate the game. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I guess they don't want to make Fractals harder by nerfing the potions, but I mean, it almost clashes with their unique modifier idea. They don't want unique modifiers in the game that kind of make the game a little bit more confusing, but it is what it is. This bonus will provide greater health increases as higher value agony resistance infusions are equipped, helping to smooth out rough spots in daily tier 4 clears and helping to prepare more players to tackle challenge modes. Yeah, I mean, I don't actually necessarily think that's even false, actually. I think that is actually true. Having more vitality will actually help people, particularly if you end up on a squishier class. Yeah, I don't mind making Fractal giving players an easier time surviving in Fractals. I think I would agree with the goal that they have here, right? Yeah, and I know a lot of people are going to flame me for saying that, but yeah, I would agree with the goals that ArenaNet has here. I'll skip over the Sanctuary Rune thing because it's honestly not super relevant. They just like change the functionality a little bit. It's much more interesting to talk about the trait that Engine here has. Looking at Elementalist, we see room for small but key changes in Weaver and Tempest. I mean, small but key. I mean, we're off to a good start here. But need to pull back on potential top-end damage for Catalyst. Weaver is known for being very selfish, providing few boons for nearby allies. With changes to Raging Storm Air Attunement, Elementals will be able to upkeep a base of 50% Fury uptime on nearby allies. In Weaver specifically, we've also updated their minor trait, Elemental Refreshment, to give barrier to allies when the Weaver executes a dual attack, helping to incrementally prevent incoming damage. Yeah, and this is true, actually. They actually, basically, to make sure it was only 50%, not 100%, they actually did nerf this trait by 50. The base duration was basically enough to have permanent Fury before Raging Storm. It would give you, like, infinite Fury self. They actually halved it so you can give it to allies. And that actually does have ramifications for Elementalist builds. I would imagine specifically Lightning Rod Weaver is not very happy with that. I would also imagine Fresh Air Weaver is probably not super happy about that in PvP as well. Because now your Fury uptime is absolutely in the shitter, right? Which is very bad when you're trying to play this aggressive power build. Here's my actual criticism with this. Okay? They should just let the elite specs be specialized with this stuff. I think they should just really say, you know what? Weaver's going to be a glass cannon. Yeah, it is. It is. Condi Weaver is going to be fat. Power Weaver is going to be sick. It's going to be like 40k DPS. Power, 40k DPS. And Condi Weaver is going to be like 40k again. Just let it happen, right? Like, you know, you could go with this direction and making it a bit more hybrid-y, a bit more supporty with more barrier uptime. But I think a lot of the Ellie mains kind of want a glass cannon. I think a lot of Ellie players want a glass cannon build. Maybe give it to them, right? Instead of it being this very option. It doesn't really do like insane damage. It has no utility. They even say this here. They are aware of this. At the same time, they know it's very selfish. And they're going to give it like 500 AoE barrier on dual skill. I mean, that's not really going to help. It's not a bad idea, but it's not good enough, right? You know, Tempest is gaining the ability to grant alacrity to nearby allies with an update to Lucid Singularity, which now grants allies alacrity in a circle of a radius of 360 when completing an overload. We expect this to be viable with fresh air overload builds, but we'll be watching to see what the community does with it and what further tweaks we can make in the future to help it succeed. So, okay, so here is the problem here. This is a very, this is an interesting statement. As I understand it, like the fresh air alacrity boon Tempest build is pretty mediocre, right? I mean, it's obviously playable, but I think it has pretty low damage with this, right? You know, and the problem is if you play this build, if you play like the only alacrity build, that's kind of all you do. If you're going to play fresh air alacrity Tempest, you only give alacrity, nothing else. That is not very attractive considering the other options that are out there. I guess you give Fury too, right? But you're only going to be spamming air overload, and this is not... That's just not really good, right? Like with this stuff. And that's a serious issue. The Condi build, I think, is actually halfway decent. Playing like a Ritualist or Celestial setup, where you're giving Might, you're giving Vigor and Regen. You also have access to, of course, Alacrity, Protection uptime as well, you know, from the Earth Overload and so on. Right, so that's got something to it. But I think it's very weird that they identified the Fresh Air Overload build here. In that regard, yeah, I don't know, but I mean, yeah, sure, I like it. I like, you know, I like the idea that fresh air could be a cool Tempest build. Again, I'm just going to repeat myself here a little bit. I really think what ArenaNet should do with Elementalist is really allow the Ellie specs to be specialized, right? Weaver, glass cannon, all-out damage, power or Condi. Catalyst, kind of more of a hybrid, boon support, damage deal, a bit of a brawler, right? Bit tankier. Maybe give it a vitality trait in Catalyst, and then combine that with like the elemental empowerment so it gets up to like 15 or 17k HP. That would be pretty interesting, right? You've got blocks on hammer. Maybe make the block give AoE barrier, not just barrier to you. Maybe make some of the healing AoE on Catalyst as well, right? And on Tempest, make it like kind of a hard healer, right? Like a very hard healer with the aura healing, right? Like the vigor, the regen, the really good defensive boons. Give it some stability maybe instead, right? Really lean into that defensive support. Have Catalyst more of an offensive support and Tempest more of a defensive support. Right? Have that distinction. Because right now I think all of the Ellie builds kind of mush together into one thing. I like that heal Tempest can be good, but again, there are design issues here, right? They don't mention at all the fact that Lucid Singularity overlaps with the Aura Heal trait, a really key trait on Tempest, right? So if you want to give Alacrity, you lose an important part of your support, which is your auras that you apply are going to heal. Why are we not talking about that? Why is that not mentioned here? Because this is like a serious thing that's going on with the design. Why do they think that's okay? Why is that part of the design vision there? It's not been mentioned here. And that's a gaping hole in these notes here. Why is that not being talked about? And now let's talk about Catalyst. Catalyst has recently begun to become meta-defining in raids, with a personal damage potential almost 20% higher than any other specialization, while at the same time eliminating the need for quickness, support roll, and stacked. We're making a key set of reductions to it to remediate these issues. So, okay, if you actually cut... If you cut this statement, I think it's actually fine. So if we do Catalyst was problematic because it was able to be stacked to provide quickness while sacrificing a very low amount of damage, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. I'm there with you all the way, ArenaNet. We're running together through the fields, holding hands. I'm totally with you. But this statement is where the problems come in. It's a little disconnected from reality, if I'm gonna be honest here. And it also it's very the context that's being used here is not correct. So is this actually true? Yes. Catalyst actually at high level play in speedruns is extremely overpowered. It's genuinely broken. It's disgustingly broken, actually. Well, it was anyway. Disgustingly broken. And I agree. I agree with ArenaNet. Being able to stack quickness, okay, and give up very little damage at the same time isn't well designed, okay? So why did you let Warrior do that with banners, ArenaNet? Why did you do that? Because Bladesworn can do that now, by the way, guys. And still do a very high amount of damage. And also you can stack Warriors. Why can you do that with Firebrand? Right, as well. You can do this with Firebrand at the same time. If you really wanted to. You don't, but you could. If you wanted to. Like, this is the issue here. Is that this is a very unusual thing to say when other things can do this in the game as well. Like, it wasn't as extreme as Catalyst, obviously, but then just say that it was too much damage, right, at the same time. There wasn't, I don't know, like, it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. It really is, with the way they actually kind of approach this, and what they talk about here. So here's the problem. Meta-defining. What do we mean by meta-defining? Like, in my opinion, the relevant meta is what are you going to encounter on your day-to-day, right? Like, when you're out in the open world, when you're playing Fractals, when you're playing raids, when you're playing your strike missions, all this kind of stuff. Let's actually have a look, because we have data on this, guys. Let's actually have a look at the meta. And I will be 100% fair. This is the patch before the change. This is the summer patch here. So this is the patch that we're on here. Do we really think that the Guild Wars 2 PvE metagame is being defined by Catalyst here? Really? I could say Mech. I could say Firebrand. I could even say Scourge, maybe. I mean, not so much. It's pretty even there with Virtuoso. But I don't think I'm saying that Catalyst is defining the metagame here for normal play, right? At all. And this statement is not going to go over well. I haven't even read the comments yet, but yeah, this is not going to look good. Now, it's a very interesting thing, actually, because in some ways, if you play Catalyst really well, you actually will do very well in Pugs. I'd encourage people who might be angry about this to look at Mela. Mela will Pug raids on Catalyst, and he'll be top DPS almost every single time. And is that because he's playing with players who are worse than him? Or rather, well, I'll describe it in the positive affirmation. Is he a lot better? Is he really good at the game? And that's why he's able to get value? Yes. But again, like, ArenaNet don't really do what they want to do here. They want to try and, kind of raise the effective floor of players, but they actually don't do this with Catalyst, really, so much. I guess they try and address it with these aftercasts a little bit to make the build a little bit easier to play by reducing the aftercasts. But again, the build just gets nerfed overall. And then there is this putrid design change, which again, conspicuously doesn't get mentioned, right? In PvE only, when you take Spectacular Sphere, you now all of a sudden just do 10% less damage. I mean, look, making the sphere bigger, great. But why are we doing 10% less damage? Sorry, I think I said 10% more. You do 10% less damage now, whenever you take this trait. What an unfun trait to pick. Imagine clicking a button that reduces your damage by 10%. That's not a good feeling, right? It's just not a good feeling. I think it's like the only... It's the only profession that even has something like that, by the way. And you might go ahead and say, well, it's the same thing as nerfing it, Teapot. And you're right, but psychologically, it's worlds apart, right? For example, if you just... if you made Elemental Epitome just way better in PvE, so you get more damage from your stacks of Elemental Empowerment, and then you nerfed all Catalyst down, that would be a much better psychological trade-off, in my opinion. Because you've nerfed all of the damage down, given it back in a DPS trait, and then, by taking the quickness trait, or the boon trait, you'll have that DPS trade-off built into that decision. And all of a sudden, instead of pressing a button that makes you just worse, you're picking two buttons that make you better in different ways, right? And I hope that makes sense. And this, again, is why, again, a huge criticism I have of this patch is not necessarily the balance, it's the design, right, in this regard. Yeah. Which is kind of the issue. Because I think Catalyst, I don't mind Catalyst being really strong. I just think they should lean into what it is. Really. They need to make the traits give you, like, proper, trade-offs. So they need to make, like, the damage traits very strong and the quickness traits, like, be a proper trade-off. Or they need to fully lean into it being more of a hybrid, right? And add way more support to it, which I think it would be a good candidate for. It would be a good candidate for, right? You know, it's, you know, it would be a great candidate to be that kind of firebrand, right? Prot uptime, might uptime, swiftness uptime, right? You know, fury, quickness, maybe even stability, potentially. Hell, maybe some AoE healing, some AoE barrier. I think it would be a great candidate to nudge it in that direction. Again, instead of trying to pigeonhole Ellie into this hyper-aggressive option that realistically won't see a very high play rate ever, they need to kind of let it do what it's supposed to do, in my opinion. I mean, hey, that's my opinion, obviously, but it is what it is. And again, yeah, like the big problem that I have with this is that they didn't make Catalyst easier to play for newer players, right? They didn't they could make the auto attacks a lot better. They also, you know, they made the Jade Sphere worse, right? Which again is kind of one of the easier things to use instead of like the, you know, the rotation there as well. So now that's also worse. You just do less damage, like significantly less damage actually as well, in PvE as well. I mean, yeah, it's tough, right? It's definitely tough. And again, I hate to say it, I do really dislike the wording here, because that is really going to feel bad to a lot of Elementalist players here, because to them, this isn't true. It's technically true at a very high level, but in reality, this is what it looks like, right? If you're going to point out a problem in the Guild Wars 2 metagame, it ain't Catalyst, right? And I also think it's kind of worth noting that the metagame at high level will always be extreme. There's always going to be a best in slot DPS, right? And yeah, sure, maybe Catalyst was a little bit, you know, it was like very strong basically everywhere or in a lot of different encounters. Yes, it probably was. But do you know what? It's because there aren't many builds like Catalyst. Why do you guys think Elementalist is so problematic? Elementalist is very problematic because in general, there aren't that many glass cannon builds in Guild Wars 2. Right? A lot of builds tend to be a little bit more towards the hybridy, the less selfish, right? Elementalist is really hard to balance for ArenaNet because they insist on really pushing this very glass cannony build, which obviously is going to underperform in pug groups and in new players and overperform in really experienced groups and really try-hard groups, right? Because the not having support is really bad in kind of scuffed, weird scenarios in pugs where you have to kind of scrabble to survive, right? But glass cannon builds are amazing for really sweaty players because guess what? They don't need all of that support. And they're also very willing to grind 300 tries until they die, right? You know, until they actually get the kill, right? You know, if you look at a speed run, a lot of these top players are going to do, they'll wipe like 200 times, right? You know, they'll really wipe. They'll keep dying. And, you know, if one of those glass cannon builds happens to go downstate, they just GG it and go again, right? You know, they're not there to try and do it. But it's just really worth noting that the metagame is always going to be extreme in high-level play. That's just kind of the way it is, because there will be a best-in-slot setup, right? That's just the nature of it. One thing is going to have a bigger number than the other, right? It's very hard to go away with that, but... yeah, Elementalist deserves its own video from me, to be honest. It's in a very unusual spot. Engineer. In Engineer, we've updated skills on their core rifle weapon to modernize it to more recent gameplay standards and better support power builds. Yeah, and you know what? Okay, disconnected. I would be so on board with this if it wasn't NG, right? Because here is the thing, guys. NG is not exactly struggling right now. Mech is absolutely dominating after EOD. It was insane. Like, they giga-buffed Mech on release. Actually, insane build. However, are ranged power builds healthy for the game? Yes, actually. That's one of the really big gaps in the metagame, is ranged power builds. It's why it's really cool to see stuff like Power Virtuoso and Power Mechanist. However, it is also worth noting that it would have been really nice to have a power ranged build on another class that's maybe struggling a little bit more, right? Than Engineer is, right? But that slight quibble aside, right? Yeah, this is actually good. It's good to see these changes in the game, in my opinion, right? I like builds like this because they're pretty easy to play. I think Condi, a lot of builds in the meta that dominate right now, they dominate because they're ranged, right? Scourge, for example, very dominant as well, right? Because of, you know, historically because of this, right? Very dominant because, again, it's ranged, right? And yeah, of course, this is another like 10-year topic, but yeah, a rule of thumb is that melee builds should do more damage than ranged builds, because being ranged is a huge advantage, right? It allows you to have uptime, and you look, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at any of the recent Strike Mission challenge mode progression. Look at the, you know, people just clearing these challenge modes. Look at people clearing fractals, right? What you'll notice is that a huge amount of the builds used are ranged. Even the kind of glassy Soul Beast that was used in Harvest Temple challenge mode actually was ranged. You played longbow and axe, right? You play longbow and axe, which again is purely ranged. No matter what weapon set you're ranged, being ranged is a massive advantage. Games on console, you're actually incorrect. I'm not going to get into this now, actually, but for ranged, well, actually, no, I will. Because I don't want to get memed on YouTube. Ranged is a strict advantage to have, and the reason for this is because worst case scenario, you can stand in melee with your ranged weapon. So unless you add some kind of weird stuff like minimum ranges, so you're too close and you can't attack, ranged is a strict advantage. There is no downside to ranged builds in Guild Wars 2. And I'd really encourage you to, I'd really encourage everyone to think about that, right? And really kind of think it through, and think why that's true. But you'll come to the conclusion that it is true. In terms of like damage, right? Okay. But anyway, let's go ahead and continue. And this actually is the kind of insight that I love, right? I've obviously been quite critical with this. Reflect mechanics. Yeah, they could, but they could do that with melee, and they could also do, you could also just, Scourge has no projectiles, right? Too. So yeah, you can counter projectiles, but that's not about being ranged, right? That's more about having projectiles. But additionally, let's move on. This is a cool insight. One of these standards is that your number 2 skill should be damage positive if possible. Something you want to use whenever it's available as a regular part of your gameplay. For this reason, we've switched the location of Blunderbuss and Netshot, so that Blunderbuss is on number 2 and Netshot is on number 3. Blunderbuss had its cooldown reduced and now additionally applies might to the engineer and nearby allies, making the skill key for regular use in combat. I actually really like this. And that's interesting. It's interesting that they think about this. And now that, I mean, I guess it's obvious, right? But a lot of weapons are like this. Like the number 2 is something that you use off cooldown a lot of the time, right? To do damage. I guess like Mesmer Staff too, maybe not. I guess. So maybe they'll end up moving the Phantasm there or something weird, right? Like, so the Phantasm goes there instead. or something like that. But yeah, that to me isn't that. I think it's super interesting, just on a game design and kind of an insight into the mind of ArenaNet that they actually think about it that way. That's super interesting. I mean, yeah. And Netshot's even better now, too. You immobilize. But yeah, I mean, I like that you give Might on that. It's kind of cool. Bit of a buff to Rifle NG, to Rifle Mech, Rifle Hollow, of course. Poor Rifle Hollow, not having a lot of damage right now, but yeah. And I guess I might as well get into this right now, like, here as well. So there's a bit of an issue here. And I guess they can't fix everything in one go, but they did all of these reworks, but a lot of builds that have kind of been slowly getting out power crept over time haven't been addressed. Right? Why aren't we talking about Dragon Hunter or Daredevil or Weaver, right? Hell, even Tempest, right? Power Tempest or Combi Tempest, right? Why aren't we talking about Hollowsmith? What about Reaper, right? A lot of these builds have just kind of been left. They could have played with the numbers a bit, but they kind of didn't, right? And it's like, why? Why didn't we do that? Like we have, you know, we know that these builds aren't performing as well, right? You know, you can look everywhere for the data, right? But that's another kind of big criticism. It's not even what's in the patch. I think what's in the patch does bother people a little bit, but it's almost like what's not in the patch also really bothers people. And the fact that there isn't this acknowledgement, there is a problem. I think I can, you know, it's nice when people acknowledge the problem, right? Like if if there's an issue, people actually acknowledging that it's real, I think is really important. And this is definitely an issue. And just for the record, for those on YouTube, I have actually kind of skimmed through this already. This is actually something that really does bother me about this post. The failure to acknowledge that there is a problem, right? All this is doing is just saying, right, this is why we did this, conveniently omitting some of the very questionable design decisions that they made, right? We're not going to talk about why we did that one, but we're going to talk about the ones that are justifiable, and we're not going to talk about the other ones, and we're also not going to talk about the issues, right? And maybe that's not exactly the scope for something like this, I guess, and that's understandable, but come on, right? I think, you know, like, people are upset, like, context, right? The notes that, well, the actual patch itself really upset people. I think people would have been very happy if there was an acknowledgement that there actually is a problem here, which kind of isn't the case. But oh well. We visited traits that have conflicting range requirements. The maximum range which high caliber and no-scope work has been increased from 300 to 450, while the minimum range at aim-assist rocket functions have been reduced from 450 to 150, creating a zone in between where all of these traits can function together. It's actually a little bit weird. I would just probably remove the minimum range requirement on aim-assisted rocket, because it does have this slightly it has this very unintuitive, weird thing where you kind of have to be outside of melee range to use it, but also you have to be, you still want to be close to the boss, right? Because you're a DPS one, you want to be stacked with everyone, right? It's a very unusual decision, in my opinion. But yeah, there you go. I would just remove it. It's like a pointless number now. It's like, set it to 0, right? There's just no reason for it to be there anymore, to be honest. But yeah. Long-term request for mechanist polish. I actually, you know, honestly, all the mech changes are actually really good. I know that, you know, again, like, mech is not exactly, like, sucking right now. But yeah, they made it so you can use your F2 all the time now on mech crisis zone, like during your barrier burst. That's nice. You can use your rocket punch really easily now without interrupting and trolling. Yeah, your mech animation locks itself. There's only one more thing. I'll just put this in for the request. I actually wish you could do barrier burst and shift signet, which you can't. You can see that my shift signet actually interrupts my barrier burst. I actually think that let's go the full way, right? Let's go, you know, let's go the entire way, gamers, and go ahead and let shift signet allow my mech to continue using its actions as well. That's the final thing there as well for that. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like the NG changes, I don't really have a problem with them. They're nice, right? Like some quality of life. I mean, yeah, I think this is pretty questionable here as well, but you know, cool insight there on Blunderbuss. But yeah, NG, nothing too crazy. Let's go ahead and look at the justification for Guardians. With this patch's focus on removing party-shareable stacking attribute bonuses for traits, we're revisiting the trait Pervert Inscriptions, and it's changing to no longer share Signet passives with allies when activated. Instead, it will allow you to maintain your Signet's passive effects while they're on cooldown. So, here's the thing. I view this as throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So why did ArenaNet remove banners and spirits? Because they were oppressive to the meta, right? People felt they were mandatory. Oh man, I'd love to play Tempest, but I can't because Druid has spirits. Oh man, we've got to have a warrior every single time. Oh man, right, I've got to have that. I've got to play this. That's why I did that. And that's very justifiable. Okay? That's 100%, that is 100% justifiable, in my opinion. Right? I think. But this is not a good example of that. It was just kind of like a very skillful, interesting trait, right? Like, and now they've kind of made it kind of boring, right? Now it's the exact same trait as the Elementalist trait in the Earth trait line that just gives you your passives permanently as well. It means there's no reason to run Radiance on Heal Firebrand anymore, so you've lost some build diversity there. And again, it wasn't an oppressive modifier. This wasn't oppressive at all. It certainly kind of enabled Dragon Hunter a little bit in certain situations, particularly in Fractals, obviously, because you could share loads of extra power damage there. So I think this is kind of, it's been removed, but not for a good reason, right? I don't really think it makes the game like crazy complicated to have this unique modifier. I mean, if it does, then you're going to have to remove like everything, right? Like remove every single unique modifier from the game. But I don't think that's a good idea. I think having unique modifiers can actually be pretty cool, and I think this was an example of one of them. So again, like I understand what they're saying here, and it is a justification. However, I do not think it is a particularly good justification, and I also think it misses the point. It misses the point of their own. It kind of misses the point of what they wanted to do. They wanted to remove mandatory unique modifiers. In my opinion, that would be my interpretation of what they want, but that's not what this is. This isn't a mandatory unique modifier. It's a very and you don't have it all the time. It's not permanent, right? It's like very, that's how it is, right? But there you go. Yeah, you're not wrong. That's not an incorrect statement, to be fair, right? For sure, people might try and play it, and they'll not get value out of it. So in some ways, like playing an easier build, like the Virtues build, yeah, sure, maybe that does. It's a very, very, I guess, a slightly cynical take on it, but yeah, not incorrect, not incorrect. This is a good opportunity to make some updates to the signet skills themselves. Yeah, I mean, I think this stuff here was actually just flat out, maybe just bad expectations. I was really expecting some proper reworks, but they just kind of made them better, right? Signet of Mercy is really good now in PvE. I think, why is there a paragraph on Signet of Resolve? I guess it's because it's like a full functionality rework here. Signet of Resolve previously did not very much. Every 10 seconds, it would check if you had a Condi on you. If it did, it would remove it, regardless if there was a condition or not. It would go back to sleep until the next 10-second interval. We've updated this Signet to function more like a condition-blocking version of Aegis. While not on an internal cooldown, the Signet is now watching to see if an incoming condition will be applied. And if it is, it wakes up immediately and removes it. Then it goes on a 5-second internal cooldown. It'll also work if there's a condition on you when it comes off internal cooldown too. These changes will make it a lot more useful and able to compete against other strong healing options. Yeah, I actually don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that the design of this ability is... They've significantly improved the design of Signet of Resolve. Thumbs up. Nice. Yeah. That's something, I guess. Also just a Firebrand nerf in there. Boom. There it is. And another again, like bit of grit in the eye here. I really disapprove of making skills functionally different in PvP and World versus World. And PvE, I think just makes it harder for players to learn. I mean, sure, I think it's, as I understand it, it's actually not a bad decision from a balance perspective. Firebrand sucks in PvP, and, Aegis is really nice to have. In World versus World 2, having Aegis spam is really good. So from a balance perspective, it's probably not actually bad. But in general, Aegis spam in PvP, probably unhealthy, not gonna lie. But I don't know, whatever. Yeah... I don't know. Not a fan, to be honest. Not a fan, if you ask me. But yeah, that's true actually as well. It's a very general nerf. Like, with Amplified Wrath, this is definitely a very good point. They've kind of misidentified the issue here, right? The issue is Firebrand, right? It's not, like, Burn DH, right? Or even Condi Willbender. Like, no one's, like, spamming a zillion Condi Willbenders, right, that would also use this trait. That's not the issue. The issue is this. This is why, like, Firebrand dominates the meta. It's because of Firebrand, right? It's the traits in there that make it so strong. It's the utility that it brings alongside the good damage and very high quickness firebrand, right? A very high quickness uptime, or 100% quickness uptime, and great boon access in general, right? Like, this is the issue. So nerfing this part of it nerfs all Condi guard builds, whereas this is where the actual problem lies, right? Again, so this is kind of like a bit of a swing and a miss to an extent. Firebrand isn't going to go anywhere because of this change. Quite the contrary. In fact, it continues to dominate the meta very hard. Mesmer. For Mesmer, we're making changes on how Chronomons are going to apply boons to allies, with a focus on making their boon application methods easier to use with a consistent size 360 circle and easy to keep up with moving groups. You know, maybe it's because I haven't played Chrono in a long time, but I actually don't have very much. I think all of this makes sense to me, right? And I actually like that this was pointed out to me earlier in the chat, and I actually agree with this. It actually leaves room for Power Chrono as well, because your Grandmaster trait is quickness, alacrity, damage, right? Because you have Seize the Moment, you have Stretch Time, and you have Chrono Phantasma. And they're all really strong traits in their own right, and they all do a very specific thing that's exclusive with the other two. Okay, right? That's actually, oh, now we're talking, right? Now, I think there are definitely some issues here. The extra crit chance that you get, they gave it to Virtuoso, right? Instead of giving it to Mesmer in general, say on the dueling trait line, for example, which, funnily enough, is basically the arms trait line, right? Because there's loads of Fury theme there as well. It's like very critical strike themed. So it would have made a lot of sense, but you know what? We're not doing it. We're giving it to Virtuoso. So yeah, your slow up time is going to be really annoying to deal with, right? So you're not going to have necessarily like the ability to use danger time very effectively. In general, I do think Chronomons needs a little bit more. Like the boon versions need more damage. I think the wells you're going to have to take because of stretch time are actually very undertuned. They should make the wells significantly better. But I actually don't mind what they're doing here. Right? I think, obviously people are being very critical of the balance patch, but I actually think I'd be pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with these Chrono changes. I'd like to see some looks at Chaos and Inspiration, because right now, like, Inspiration Chrono is like, because Signet of Inspiration kind of got the absolute hammer, going down to one target unless you have Inspiration, you take the trait there to make it 5 targets. Pretty brutal. And if you take Inspiration, you kind of struggle to find a third trait line. The natural one would be Chaos, basically. And to be honest, I think they should just kind of give more boon access, like AoE boon access to Chaos again, I think. That's probably the solution there. And then you have like a really interesting healing setup, I think, in that regard. But yeah, there it is. Yeah, I think something like that, right? Like 20% crit chance while you have quickness, right? That would be a pretty interesting trait, actually. That would be a cool trait. Yeah, that's not bad. Kind of make it the opposite, right? Kind of the opposite of what it is. Yeah, I see that. It's a good idea. See, look, we're putting in the work here. Quan Punch there with the fucking juice, He doesn't do Dragon's End anymore, but he does bring the energy. I like it. But yeah, I actually have very little to say about Mesmer because I agree with these statements, with what they're saying here. I think Tides of Time giving might and swiftness and then quickness or alacrity, that's actually pretty cool, right? More boon access. You actually have stability with Mantra of Concentration. You have Aegis with Well of Precognition. You can, there's actually a lot of potential there, I think. I think Chrono is kind of, it's revving up, right? I think a few more patches down the line, I think this is going to be really strong, actually. If they keep looking at this, they keep slightly buffing the damage. They maybe look at Chaos, right, to make it more of a support-oriented option, right? Maybe make Power Chrono a bit better as well, and make Chrono Phantasma better again. Make it so that, Danger Time kind of works better. Maybe its quickness instead of slow, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I see it. I don't really, I think the design is fine here, right? In fact, I kind of like the design. I like it. I'll go that far. I kind of like the design on this. I think this is, it's kind of cool. Necromancer. All right. Making a key quality of life improvement for Reaper players with a change to death perception. Instead of giving 33% critical strike chance while in Shroud, it'll now give 10% critical strike chance all the time. This change allows you to consistently select your gear to cap critical strike chance all the time without needing to significantly overcap in Shroud. We're also changing the ferocity to a plus 15% damage multiplier to your critical strikes. Overall, this is a small wealth of damage. This is true, by the way, but do you know what actually really bothers me? Look, I'm doing it again, guys. Why is this line necessary? Let me tell you why this line is necessary. It's necessary because for some very unusual reason, ArenaNet decided to implement this in a very, very weird way. So Previously, what this trait did was it gave you 300 ferocity while you're in Death Shroud, right? Which is 20% more critical strike damage. So, obviously, when players saw this, right, they thought, hang on a minute, this is a nerf, because this is 15%, that's less. They're nerfing us. Ain't it? No. But that's actually not true, because that's not how this trait works. And we'll crunch the numbers on stream. So, what does this actually do? It says, gain increased critical strike damage while in Shroud, not extra ferocity. So what does this mean? Well, what it actually means is it actually applies a flat multiplier to your critical strike damage instead of giving you more critical strike, instead of giving you more ferocity, right? Like more crit damage. So let's actually just go ahead and do the numbers here. So let's imagine that we have a 1,000 damage hit and our critical strike damage is 200%. So our ferocity is, we have 200% critical strike damage. Well, our damage is going to do double that. Okay? Now, what Death Perception does is that it takes that number and then multiplies it by another 1.15. So we do times 1.15. As you can see, that gives us a number of 2,300. Right? And now if we do the same thing, but it's 15% ferocity, right? It would look like this. 1,000 damage, and then times 2.15, right? 2, then another 15% critical strike damage, right? And you'll see that we actually do end up better here. And this is why the developers are saying this is a DPS increase. But again, the fact that they have to say that is actually because this trait is kind of poorly designed and it's even more confusing because they just say critical strike damage, right? 15%. And if you're a player, you're going to go, oh, critical damage. That's this. That makes this number go up by 15%. But that's not what it actually does. It modifies it by 15%, which is not the same thing. It is better, but again, like that might sound like a nitpick. Maybe it will. Okay? It may well sound like a nitpick. But I think it just makes the game slightly more confusing to players for no reason, right? And honestly, I'm not about that, guys. I'm not about that. So, here's the problem with this statement as well. Like, this also seems to ignore the fact that Reaper actually has a pretty shit job crit capping. If you're playing Reaper, you have no crit modifiers. So, basically now, with all this stuff, you're at 85% critical strike chance. So you're still going to have to add a whole bunch more Assassin's pieces on top to get to that crit cap. And you can't really take Decimate Defense because then you're going to Giga over cap. That's not really worth it. You don't want to give up a 10% damage modifier. To be honest, maybe what they do is they make this trait... I think what they could do is they could move Decimate Defenses to the Adept trait line, right? And then just say, fuck it, you overcap, right? So right now you take Chilling Nova, right? Which is like a DPS increase, obviously, right? You could just... this is not it would be a terrible trait if you did this, I guess. Yeah, that would suck for PvP Reaper because you kind of like that trait on PvP. I don't know, right? Like you could swap Decimate Defenses with fucking Relentless Pursuit. I don't fucking know, right? Okay, like you can do this, right? You can do this, right? Hell yeah. Hey, just put it here. Put Decimate Defenses in the Adept trait line, right? And then all of a sudden, you can take Decimate Defenses and Soul Eater, Reaper's Onslaught, happy fucking days. Love it. We're perma-crit capped everywhere. We can even throw in some Dragon stats. Pretty cool, actually. That's kind of a nice, kind of like fun bonus of playing Reaper. Maybe slap a bit more damage on Reaper. Bob's your uncle. We're back in business. Reaper's on the menu. Hell yeah. Maybe look at Soul Barbs. Make Soul Barbs a bit better. Although that would kind of make Scourge better as well. Probably don't want to do that. Maybe make Awaken the Pain better. Who knows? Get even more might. Hell yeah. But yeah, that's kind of like my kind of thoughts on the design here. And again, on the reasoning here. Like, this doesn't really address some of the slightly weird ways they went about doing this. But I don't know. Maybe I'm asking for too much there. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's a good call, actually, Boven. Yeah, you could add it to Cold Shoulder. So you get more damage, and you get more critical strike chance against foes there. Yeah, so like a double 15%. So you also, chill foes, You have a higher chance to critically strike chilled foes, and they take more damage from your attacks. I like that. See, look, he's a big brain, isn't he? That's why he was always winning Mystic builds back in the day, guys, okay? Because he's got a massive intellect, yeah? The Warhorn, yeah, I mean, it'll be a pretty beast minor trait, to be fair. Yeah, that would be pretty monstrous, yeah. The Warhorn traits are fine. I think they're kind of undertuned, I guess, right? Banshee's Well is a really good trait now for Heal Scourge specifically. You're definitely taking that on Heal Scourge. It just gives you a 10% healing on your transfusion, better regeneration when you dodge roll with your blood marks. You res faster as well. I mean, yeah, it's a really good trait. Kind of rip poor old Vampiric Presence, I guess, but yeah, it's a good trait. I guess if you're playing Blood Scourge, maybe you'd play Vampiric Presence for more DPS. So you have like more group DPS contribution, but yeah, it's a strong trait now. I don't actually mind it, right? Yeah, don't have a problem with it, really. I think it's cool. I think it's cool that they're giving a bit more healing. I'd like to see some more boon support added to Scourge, so that Scourge kind of has that boon option as well. Because Necro, what it really lacks now is kind of a defensive boon option. You have an offensive boon option with Harbinger. Great. I think that's fun. That's fun. Love it. I think Harbinger's a little undertuned right now in general, but, you know, the idea is solid. So, yeah, I think Scourge should be that defensive boon option with Sand Savant. But yeah, in general, nothing wrong with Necro there. Ranger, danger, gamers. Okay. All right, here we go. The main changes being made to Ranger on the Spirit skill. Spirits no longer apply effects when an ally in the radius strikes an enemy. Instead, each Spirit applies a boon to allied targets in the radius each 3-second interval. The Nature's Vengeance trait increases the base duration of these boons by 50% and causes Spirits activated to apply alacrity to allies in the area. Yeah, I think this is fine. I actually think this is fine. I think I'd maybe nudge the boon duration up a little bit so you overcap. A lot of other support builds like Mech and Firebrand overcap on a lot of these boons, specifically stuff like Fury, right? You overcap really hard on it, right? Like you overcap on Protection really hard on a lot of these builds, right? You know, there's just like an overcap component to it, I think, which I think would be nice to have. I guess you kind of do it with Warhorn a little bit, right? You overcap with Warhorn a bit, with, you know, you can apply regeneration, you know, apply swiftness, you apply Fury. So, yeah, I guess so, right? But I think it would be nice if you actually did build up a bit of a stock, because that, again, that kind of is very much in line with how other support builds typically operate these days. This is a good opportunity to make a change to Druid's Grandmaster healing trait, Lingering Light. The old Lingering Light gave very bursty healing with a large increase while in Celestial Avatar. We want to smooth this out and have parts of this bonus carry over for 10 seconds after you exit Avatar, so it's a more reliable option to overall improve your healing output. That didn't seem like enough, so we're using it to help increase the reliability of your Astral Force generation while you're not in Celestial Avatar form. Lingering Light will passively generate Astral Form at a slow rate. You know, this change, the way they've worded this is actually pretty interesting. Because I feel like the Astral Force generation is irrelevant in PvE, but it almost feels like they think it is relevant. I guess they're just talking from a design perspective. When I read this, I thought, ooh, they're trying to make Druid a thing in PvP, huh? That's the way it sounded. Because, you know, Celestial Avatar generation is an issue in PvP. Druid isn't really good, but, you know, good to kind of nudge it in that direction to make it a little bit better. And yeah, and honestly, I think you just run Lingering Light on Druid very frequently now, because the thing is that you already get loads of might from your other party members, from your Warhorn, for example, too. So you actually don't really, you maybe just skip, like Grace the Land. They nerfed Grace the Land to 1 stack anyway, and you just have like a lot of free might spewing about those anyway. Maybe you've got a Firebrand in the group, you've got like a Mech or something like that, or whatever. So you can probably get away with it in a lot of groups, actually. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there is a bug right now with this, but they're going to fix that. The boons are around the player, but they'll fix that. It's just bugged. It is broken. It is broken as hell. But yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, again, these changes are fine. I think Druid's a big winner. I think Druid's really good after this patch. I mean, kind of sucks they removed the stability when you use the active on your Elite Spirit, because again, that's the big hole in what Druid has, is the lack of stability currently, again, to compete with your Mech, compete with your Firebrand, and even with Herald now, right? Like, you know, Quickness Herald has Joust you can use. Not having stability fucking sucks in your support options, so they probably want to look at that in some way, or maybe give it back in some way. I mean, look, I even said this earlier, actually. It's not unreasonable to give pulsing stability to the Nature Spirit on Druid. Why not? Well, quite simple. Because Mech basically has perma stability because of the F2, so why not allow Druid to have, like, 1 pulsing stack of stability? Maybe make it, like, just, 1 second duration. So you have like a stack up permanently while you have the spirit up. That's basically what you have with mech anyway. It would just put it on parity. I mean, that's kind of where we are with the power level of the game. I'm not saying that, to be honest, I would probably nerf that stack on mech, to be honest. It's a little bit overpowered, and maybe just give druids some other way that it can interact with us. Maybe put it back on the active, for example. But yeah, overall, it's fine. The only thing I would critique here is the fact that I do think that it is a little bit spooky to give a key boon like Alacrity on baseline. It means that now ArenaNet has a bit of a nightmare on their hands. They have to balance every single ranger specialization around the fact that it can give Alacrity because of the nature magic trait line and because everyone has spirits. So I think in general, that will be like a slight nitpick I'd have there. I'd say it's probably better to put this stuff on elite specs. So for example, put Alacrity on Druid directly, just slap it onto Grace of the Land maybe, like alongside the Might, and then put Quickness on Untamed, right? Just like flat out put it there, right? There's an AoE Quickness trait on Untamed, just something like that, right? Hell, you could even do it like whenever you CC, you give AoE Quickness, right? Something like that, because that will be like a very simple, very straightforward, and very pure way of doing it. And boom, away you go, right? I mean, I'm not saying I should do that, but I'm saying that I think in general it tends to be it's going to be a bit easier than the balance if you kind of do lock it down a little bit like that. But there you go. Yeah, there is a commitment because you need the nature magic trait line. So you're kind of locked into 2 trait lines to do this, like your elite spec and nature magic. So it's not the end of the universe in this regard, but it's something to maybe watch out for, right? But here we go. That's it for Ranger. Again, I have very little complaints about Ranger, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, they should just make the stances way better, right? I kind of see like a cool stance share hybrid soul beast build, that could be cool. Like a ritualist build that gives alacrity and stability with Dolyak stance. Give it some other boons, right? Give it some other boon access. Make the other stances better so sharing them is really high value. Maybe make the share duration better in PvE. Fuck it. Make the share duration the same as the personal duration in PvE only. See what happens if you do that, right? Let's do some crazy shit, Now Revenant. I'm actually just going to get this out of the way, guys. The Revenant changes created an abomination in PvP. That's all I'm going to say. That is the reality. The build is an abomination. Like one of the most unfun bunker builds we've seen for a long time. So they probably should have checked that. And this is a very meta criticism they have here. I know that obviously they can't say, oh, we can't do this because it will destroy PvP, but in some ways they probably kind of should, right? Like, PvP is a game mode that ArenaNet has committed to maintain, so is World versus World. They should be thinking about stuff like this, and to be frank, they should have seen this one coming, and they should have, like, pre-split it so this wouldn't happen. Like, Bunker Vindicator was already an issue in the previous patch, and this build is apparently... I actually have players begging me to ban it. That's not a joke, guys. Begging me to ban this build in my tournaments. They're saying, please, please fix it, right? Oh, yeah, I forgot about One Wolf Pack because ArenaNet forgot about it here as well. Now, the reason they nerfed it is because, again, they wanted to kind of reduce, like, the Giga Burst of Soul Beast. And to be fair, they did compensate it well. Soul Beast is really strong now with, like, the new Axe build. Like, the Axe Longbow build is really strong, actually, to be fair, in that regard. But, again, it's kind of one of those things that slightly reduces the skill cap of the game, right? Like, that's the criticism I'd have here. And, yeah, they don't really even address it in this post so much. They just say, oh, yeah, we're just, other things, I guess. Which is a bit unfortunate. Poor old Soul Beast. Getting your fun skill nerfed. Yeah. The thing that what I don't like, actually, that I see in ArenaNet's position here, is that they seem to dislike synergies, right? Why does it attack every 1 second? I kind of think it's cool that if you're a Soul Beast and you're playing with players who have loads of quick attacks, right? Like, you can really get value out of One Wolf Pack by attacking very quickly. I like that. I think that's actually an interesting design. And it rewards thinking about your composition and synergy between different professions. And I think that it really kind of got hit in the crossfire here, right? Like, in ArenaNet's crusade against unique modifiers, they've kind of made the game a little bit less interesting and less interactive here, right? And that kind of makes me sad. I mean, again, the change is justified because honestly, Soul Beast Burst has been historically and even recently has been very problematic in terms of the way it tends to play out. But I think it feels kind of bad. But it is what it is. Honestly, I actually really like the rev changes, right? Just so everyone's aware, Quickness Herald is actually pretty damn good right now. I've seen Lederhosen play it. It seems really strong, actually. Maybe not quite like on par with Firebrand, but definitely moving in that direction. I think the criticism with the Quickness Herald stuff that holds here is that, regrettably, it's kind of a little unfun, right? Like with the design, right? Kind of forces you to double camp. It's kind of tight to keep the uptime. The methodology with which you upkeep quickness isn't that much fun, right? It's not, it's very like, they were like, okay, robot must apply quickness. How do we do it? Use on consume skill. Player will use consume skill off cooldown. 0 interactivity, 0 thought, right? Is that the best we can do? It kind of suffers from the same problem that Scrapper has, right? Where Scrapper, you don't have any thought into your abilities. You just mindlessly spam, right? The way that you deliver it is you have to use all of your utility skills and mindlessly spam. And yeah, the obvious objection to this is, yes, look at other builds. Firebrand, you only need to use like a few skills, right, to do this, right? You use your quickness mantra and feel my wrath, right? And I guess technically the heal skill too. So I guess there's a little bit of spam going on there, but not as much. You still have 2 utility skills left over that you can use reactively. Mechanist is very reactive. Like you can use your barrier signet reactively, elixir gun reactively, and shift signet reactively. All of your alacrity comes passively from your mech, right? And all that kind of stuff. Rev, again, renegade, right? Like all of your alacrity is on one button. And again, yeah, it's not the most intelligent thing in the universe, but all of your utility skills, right, on renegade to apply alacrity, they're all free. You can use your abilities at will and play reactively, right? I guess the same is kind of true with Willbender as well, right? If you give alacrity there, again, you know, all of the utility skills are free. I think I'd really like to see ArenaNet to move away from having to mash every single skill you have to upkeep a boon. I think it makes the game less skillful, it makes the game less interesting to play, and to be honest, I think it actually gives people difficulty because we know that players don't have the easiest time kind of mashing buttons and, you know, having that kind of high APM stuff. So I think stuff like this honestly isn't ideal, in my opinion, in terms of like the spam, right, and the way you have to mash. So yeah, that's that. But there you go. But there you go. That's my take on quickness. The Vintaritov is actually really cool, right? We also added a new mechanic to Sentinels, which grants a bonus effect to the first skill used after summoning the tablet. You know, I'm gonna be a bit of a party pooper here. I actually don't like this mechanic. I think it's weird. It only works when you summon the tablet, so you can re-trigger it when you destroy it and then re-summon it. But this is almost like it's a semi-hidden mechanic. It's actually very poorly telegraphed in the game, by the way. It doesn't really express this to you very well. And it's kind of like a gimmick. Only Centaur Stance has this. Like, only Centaur Stance has this mechanic. Nothing else has. It's... Why? Why not just make the abilities better? Right? If you want to make the skills better, then make the skills better. It makes the skills more interactive, I guess, and nothing wrong with that. But I think... I don't know. I'm not totally sure about it, right? Yeah, I don't know. It is very weird. It's like a very weird gimmick that they've layered onto it, right? For a slightly unusual reason, in my opinion. So, I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna say it's dog shit, but I'm not gonna say I'm its biggest fan in the world in terms of the design, right? I don't know why they felt the need to do that. Like, why did they want to do that exactly? At the same time. But yeah, I mean, the actual changes they made to Ventari are really good, by the way. Ventari's legend most suited to supporting allies through healing and condition removal, but the rest of its kit struggles to keep up with the range of tools available to other support builds. True. The usability of the tablet is another limiting factor. It can be extremely difficult to keep the tablet in the correct location, especially in engagement that are more mobile. We decided to remove the healing from Ventari's will to allow significantly reduce the cooldown of moving the tablet so it can always be where it's needed. By the way, the change is actually sick, by the way. Like, the tablet is so much better to use now. I probably increased the radius on it a little bit. Okay, so I'd probably do that in that case. So it was like 300 radius, not 240 as it is right now. Just give it a little bit of an extra size. But yeah, I actually think the quality of life they gave here is actually really cool. So that's fine as well. The salvation trait line changes were actually pretty interesting. They were kind of weird as well, though. They added some weird traits in that give you endurance. That's probably not the way to go there. And they gave a bunch of like free boon support basically on when you use various skills in Ventari on Sentinel Stars with the new trait. It's like it's called like Serene Rejuvenation, I believe. You just get like a whole bunch of boons all over the place there as well, which is pretty cool. You gain prot when you cleanse condies. I think this was they don't say this explicitly, but I almost feel this was world versus world oriented actually, rather than PvE. It feels very world versus worldy, like the focus on giving endurance back, the focus on cleansing conditions and giving boons when you cleanse conditions feels very, very very world versus worldy, you know? That's all I've got to say. And yeah, it's going to be a bit stronger. The problem with this is that because of Herald getting quickness, they had to kill the Alacrity on this build, which very regrettably kind of got rid of support Vindicator because, well, a big part of that was being able to apply Alacrity at the same time as also doing all the other support stuff you were doing. So yeah, that kind of died there as well. Little bit unfortunate there. You hate to see that one, guys. Unlucky. But yeah, I don't know. And the other problem here, I think, is it's a little bit of a tricky one to solve, and they probably can't solve this, I think. I think it will always be a bit different. The thing that is the problem is that you're going to have to choose between stability. You get to choose between, like, you want Chalice for stab, you want Ventari for healing, and you want Glint for all the other boons, right? And I guess they're intending you to actually not run... No, you have to run Glint, because you've got to give quickness, right? But the problem is that then you kind of lose this really key boon of stability, and because of the way Rev works, you kind of can't really fit that in very well, which I think leads to this build ending up being... The heal build not being good. I don't see Heal Herald being super amazing, because you just don't really get the value you need. I see the DPS power build actually being really good. I think, like, nudge its damage up a little bit, maybe buff Chalice, make the Chalice damage better. Yeah, I actually think that build's gonna be sick. It's got a lot of value, quickness uptime, loads of other boon uptime. I can see that being really, really strong. The healing build for me, I think it's always going to be held back a little bit by the way Revenant works, but I actually do really like the kind of theoretical changes that they made here, right? Particularly to the quality of life of Ventari's will, giving it some more boon access. A little undertuned, I'd say, actually, compared to everything else in the entire game. You know, I think they were very... It really surprises me. Slight tangent here, guys. I don't know why ArenaNet was so conservative with the new boon options they added to the game. It's not like Boon Warrior was OP, right? Like, when has Boon Warrior been overpowered, right? Like Heal Warrior. When has, like, Boon Herald been, like, really oppressive in the meta? Like, never. What are they afraid of, right? I think they're really worried about builds becoming oppressive to the point where they won't, like, overbuff something. And I think that this is, like, a big criticism I have of this patch in general, and honestly a lot of ArenaNet patches. I think they should just overbuff stuff sometimes. I think they shouldn't be afraid. Sometimes make something kind of OP. Make something really strong. Because that's what, you know, that didn't happen here, you know? I don't know. But that is what it is. Yeah, the other thing with Rev is that you also lost Assassin's Presence, which sucks for Boon Rev, right? And also Heal Rev too, right? Because it means you had this, like, really nice DPS increase, and now it's worthless. Like, totally worthless to you. Oh, man. Dude, looking at these traits, holy shit, why didn't they rework it? Oh, my God, why didn't they rework it? Oh, it's such a putrid trait now, holy shit. Disgusting. But, yeah, there you go, guys. That's kind of the reasoning that we got there. There's actually a lot of changes to Rev, as you can see, right? Like, they actually did a lot. Thief, honestly, I won't go into detail on the changes here, actually, because, you know, they were relatively inconsequential, I think. But I actually really appreciate the reasoning. The reasoning here is really good, right? Shadow Arts also has numerous traits that reward staying in stealth for extended periods of time, reinforcing the desire to create builds with high stealth uptime, which can be difficult to interact with. We want Shadow Arts to reward stealth, but in a more active fashion than it currently does. To this end, many traits that triggered on intervals while in stealth have been reworked to in turn grant their effects while entering or exiting stealth. So this is actually, I really like this. This is like right on the money in my opinion. Yes, actually, really fucking good. Very, very good. Yeah, and they even say here, Shadow Arts has long been a source of frustrating gameplay, particularly in PvP and World vs. World. This is partially due to the stealth generated by Concealing Restoration, melded with Shadows and Hidden Thief, which compounded with other Thief stealth sources to push stealth access to exceptional levels. Yes, they actually really understand the issues here. And they, yeah, I actually originally thought they were trying to kind of somehow shoehorn PvE support Spectre, which that didn't really happen. It didn't really make any sense. But actually viewing all of these changes through this lens actually makes a lot more sense. It's like a really good clarifying point here, I think, with Shadow Arts. And I hope they continue to go in this direction. I really like the idea. I like the idea that kind of dipping out and in of stealth is like the goal with this trait line. You want to be getting value out of your stealth attacks, like going into stealth to get some boons, get some AoE barrier to your team, right? Like, I like that. I think that's really good, as opposed to camping stealth and just doing nothing and waiting till your opponent just resetting and starting the fight again and again and again. Yeah, this is very good. Very, very good. Very good indeed. I like it. This new behavior promotes using shorter duration stealth to quickly reposition and use a stealth attack instead of sitting to accumulate value. We're also taking this opportunity to add some additional support tools to the line to complement Shadow Savior in builds looking to provide a bit more group utility. Yeah, they kind of, so they do try to kind of like nudge it in a more of a support direction. Although I think they're gonna, look, I'm not gonna lie, if sometimes you can't make a gimmick work, and I do think, look, I'm gonna be boring here. I don't think you're ever really gonna see this kind of like full support Spectre be a thing. It's too gimmicky, it's too niche, and you're not gonna be able to leverage stealth and that effect not even close to enough. Like, if you have support that's unconditional, like, say, Scrapper or Mechanist or Tempest or whatever, or Druid or Firebrand, it's unconditional, right? You don't need to have stealth to heal people on Firebrand. If you have something that is extremely conditional, like stealth, and also single target, which is kind of what Spectre is, right? Then, man, those numbers need to be ridiculous. Like, the numbers on to actually make that good would have to be absurd because of how situational and how conditional it really is. So realistically, do I ever see stuff like this actually working from like a full support Spectre POV? Nah, it's just not. There's not, the mechanics aren't there, right? It just mechanically won't work super well. But is it cool that they're trying to address Shadow Arts being the most obnoxious thing in the entire game in PvP and World vs. World? Yes, it is. I like that. That's good. Yeah, good shit. I think this actually is a bit of a sad moment here for the Thiefmans. I don't know how if the Thiefmans are really upset about this, but this does feel a little bit bad, right? Here with this critical strike chance here. Because this is like a Scholar bonus, basically. You need to have Scholar to get your crit chance. So it is like really punishing. If you get hit and you lose your 50% crit, you're very sad, right? You're very sad right now. You know, you're crying. You're in tears. You're absolutely in tears. And then the Warrior changes. Keeping an eye on Blade Swarm plays since EOD's launch shows several opportunities for polish to improve the experience here. Warrior players don't have a lot of options for utility skills that increase their damage output. This is carried over to Blade Swarm skill kit. Improvements to Dragon Spike Mine make it much more impactful as an effective source of damage. We've added the new Blade Swarm utility skill, Overcharge Cartridges, which together with an updated tactical reload will give you new tools to further increase the power of your Dragon Slash. With the removal of many shareable buffs, we're revisiting what Warriors' banners do, with an eye to use to give them the Warrior access to boon support rolls. Banners apply quickness to nearby allies when they're deployed, and then continue to pulse the Spirit Boon for its duration. This isn't intended to cover quickness alone. The tactics trait Martial Cadence now causes soldiers' focus to apply quickness in an area as well, and the Warhorn's charge is also a source of quickness. So I'll let you just very quickly kind of address like the first part here. Look, honestly, you have to, you know, Blades One was kind of like, oh, you just basically Dragon Slash and do nothing else. I get it, whatever. They wanted to give you some more buttons to press. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think maybe make the Gun Saber abilities better instead of this. I think in general, I feel like utility skills being taken for utility is really nice, rather than just like having something that you use to just do more damage over and over again. So I guess I wouldn't entirely agree with going in that direction. I think, utility skills being, well, living up to their name is a good thing. But yeah, sure. Your rotation's got a few more buttons in, right? It's a bit weird because it's like a movement skill with an evade in it, which is a little bit unusual, I guess. I think that's weird to have that in your rotation. But whatever. And your Dragon Slash does even more damage now with overcharged cartridges. Wow, insane. Big damage. And it turns out Blades One is actually like the highest benchmark in the game right now. It fucking slaps. Like this build it slaps, right? But again, I do, there is an element of criticism here as well, is that it does make the build, as I understand it, significantly harder to play, which, I mean, hey, I guess that's fair enough. But, it's also worth noting that ArenaNet kind of don't want to make things like too hard to play as well. So that is a slightly unusual thing to do at the same time there. Additionally, Warrior can also, because of the, well, I mean, now let's talk about banners. Blades One is like cool. It does a lot of damage. You can blast with that build, okay? Whatever, right? That's not the important thing here. The elephant in the room is this. And why... Okay, like... The biggest loser in this patch was Warrior. By far. Not even close. Like, no one got screwed as much as the Warrior mains. And again, you can actually see this. Like, if you guys want to see how impactful... this change was to Warrior players. I'm just going to show it. We'll just show it right now. Right, we're going to go on Wingman again. So here's the patch. So this is the patch here. And then this was the Summer Balance patch. We went from Berserker. I mean, people already stopped. People started to move away from it because they knew that banners are getting nerfed, right? You can kind of see banners getting nerfed. So people start moving away from Warrior, like 7.6. Down to 7.22 about here. You guys can't see properly, don't worry. I will move this. So you can see here that it's slowly going down as people get ready for the banner nerf. And then when it actually gets nerfed, people just literally stop playing Warrior, right? We'll just stop playing, right? We go from 7%, which is still pretty good. I mean, what's the expected value? We've got 36 elite specs, right? Well, 27 elite specs. Let's assume that we're not including core here. The expected value for each one of those specs is 3.7%. So Warrior actually doing just fine here. Like, if you're over 3%, you're actually in business basically on an elite spec. So we're 7% and then we go directly to 1%. Like that is how much worse Warrior basically became overnight because of this change. And look, I'm just going to say it. The fact that they didn't say... The fact that they didn't mention here that, yeah, we're not happy with the state of banners right now, with the way they're designed, is a bit of a red flag to me. Warrior has a lot of issues here, and I guess I've kind of spoke about them a little bit. We'll kind of focus more on like the kind of reasoning here as well. With this stuff, it's like this... the point has been missed here. Right? The point has been missed big time. Like, Warrior was left without, like, a build, right? The banner build doesn't exist anymore. You're just, like, a DPS build now. And they also, the way they did this... So, here's the issue. The implementation of quickness is very bad, in my opinion. So, why are people really upset with banners on Warrior? Well, it's because when you pick up a banner... I'll actually quickly relog to show this. When you pick up a banner on Warrior... you get no skills whatsoever. But hang on, in the previous patch, when you picked up a banner, it just reduced the cooldown. So, why did they have to change it? Why did they change that, Teapot? Well, it's because of what they did with quickness, right? So, they couldn't give you that old implementation, because if they did, you could just pick it up and spam the banner down again for quickness, again and again and again and again. So, because of their poor decision to give quickness on dropping a banner down, instead of even worst case making it pulse, wouldn't even be that overpowered, by the way, in PvE, if they did that. Wouldn't even be that OP. I mean, it would be very strong, actually, but hey, I actually wouldn't mind it being strong. But I mean, they had traits. They could have just put it on traits. They could have bought an elite spec. They could have done anything. But they chose this solution, and because of this, in my opinion, slightly poor design choice, they were forced to make another bad design choice to fix their design choice. Because basically, it was like, quickness on dropping a banner. Oh no! Now this means that, banners, you can just drop them and pick them up and give infinite quickness. Oh no, problem. We need to fix it. So we're going to make it so that you have to pick up your banners to move them instead of reducing the cooldown. And you get no weapon skills while doing that, right? That is unacceptable, right? All the other changes, you can go, you know, I'm not a big fan, right? Oh, okay, whatever, right? Well, grumble, you know, grumble, right? We're grumbling. I'm grumbling about permanent inscriptions. I'm grumbling about, like, Spotter being, you know, like the exact same thing as Assassin's President. Grumble. You know, there's like, ooh, angry muttering from the back of the crowd. This is the change that never should have shipped, okay? Flat out. I will defend my warrior friends to the death on this. This should not have made it to the game, right? This, you know what? Yeah, I will say this. This is probably one of the worst design choices I have ever seen ArenaNet make. In the history of the game. In fact, it may even be the worst design choice I have ever seen them make. It is that bad. And to be honest, ArenaNet doesn't have a history of this. I think, on the whole, things tend to be pretty well designed. You know, like, hey, I'm simping ArenaNet there a little bit. But in general, the game is pretty well designed. This is a huge outlier to that pattern, because this is absolutely apocalyptic, putrid game design here. This isn't fun. It's also not good, by the way. It's weak, and at the same time, it's unfun, which is like a fucking joyous combo to have right there. And also, it comes along with a bunch of design issues. Because now, yeah, that's right, guys. There's a 37k Bladesworn benchmark that also gives quickness uptime. At the same time, yeah, you can stack 3 of them and you're basically to 100%, which is the exact issue that they wanted to avoid with Catalyst, right? Like, this is the issue with giving boons to base classes. You can abuse it really hard on other builds. And now we're in a really big corner. Like, again, I kind of expressed it in another commentary video I had about balance, in like my balance breakdown here, but we're in trouble, man. Like, with Warrior, like, this is, I mean, you know, I have confidence in ArenaNet, okay? No kappa. I think they'll be able to unfuck it, but it's tough to unfuck this, right? Like, this is problematic, right? In my opinion. You also, I think what they could really do with is adding a healing banner to Warrior, so you can give protection. Because you don't give prot, guys, on this build. And you also don't really have a third try. I mean, I think it's maybe more aimed at kind of like an aggressive warrior build for PvE. Like, you give quickness and you do damage at the same time. That kind of makes sense. I could see that. You know, sign me up for that one. But I think it would be pretty cool. Yeah, you don't give regen either. Yeah, you could do like a heal banner for regen. Maybe throw some prot in there as well. I mean, the resistance is kind of cool. Hey, that's really good on Zaitan on Harvest Temple CM, right? You can be totally immune to the Zaitan fear. Pretty fucking cool there. We love to see that. Very nice. And I don't even have a problem with tactics, to be honest. I think it's kind of cool that, you know, whenever you have the soldier's focus of it, you give AoE quickness, throw a bit of might in there as well with marching orders. I'm down with that. Sign me up. That's pretty cool. But again, we have these issues where all of a sudden we can't heal now, right? Because you choose between quickness and healing. And again, it's this asymmetry. Firebrand doesn't do that. Firebrand gets quickness and healing. Why does Warrior have to choose, right? Same thing with Tempest. Why does Tempest have to choose between Alacrity and quickness? Met doesn't have to choose. You get both. In fact, the same traits give you healing and Alacrity built into them. Why is that? Why is there this design asymmetry across the board? And just to kind of round things out, because we're basically at the end of the patch notes here, essentially, the end of kind of like the walkthrough that, you know, the ideas that ArenaNet have posited here. My major criticism with this is that, and I guess maybe this is not exactly the right post for this to an extent. It might be better to do it in like the full balance manifesto that they're going to do. I would like to have seen some acknowledgement of the issues here, right? And just recognizing some of the problems that the game has had and have kind of been exacerbated with this patch, or been, you know, been made even more brought to the forefront by this patch. I think that feels super bad to not have that. But, yeah. Very unfortunate. In my opinion. Yeah. It's not great. Not what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a little bit more kind of in-depth analysis from ArenaNet's perspective here. But I think that there are a lot of things that conspicuously haven't been justified, like the design on banners. You know, for example, like why hasn't that been talked about? You know, like the why has like the engineer like healing trait just completely changed the way it works, and it's kind of way less enjoyable to use now, right? Why are we using 2 versions of critical strike damage on Reaper? Why? Oh, I even forgot about this change. Why did we change Whale of Doom for no reason and just made it kind of janky, right? It gives fear, but it also arbitrarily gives bonus Defiance bar damage. It just has this weird interaction with an in-game system. It was clean before. It applied days. We've made it dirtier and weirder and gimmickier. Why? Why have we done that? Right? You know, like, why did we only give the crit chance to Virtuoso? Right? You know, what's going on here? Why are we doing this split between PvP and PvE, right? With the way these skills function. What's going on there? Like, tell me why. Why are we doing that? You know, like, do we have plans to rework Spotter into something that's much more interesting instead of just like passive boons? Is that down the line happening there as well? What's going on? Right? And I think there's just a lot of things that are missing. Right? Why did we do this to Catalyst? Right? Why did we just do 10% flat damage nerf when you take quickness? Right? Or you take AoE boons on Spectacular Sphere? What's the point? Why are we doing that? In that regard. Why are we choosing between healing and alacrity on Tempest, but you don't on other builds? A lot of the issues just kind of very much left unaddressed by these changes, in my opinion. These notes, in my opinion. Well, we are going to be getting kind of like a really... I think down the line, there is going to be like a full balance vision be described by ArenaNet. I don't know when that's going to be, but I believe that's kind of down the line as well. But yeah, would be very, very cool indeed to see that. Definitely looking forward to that one. You know, balance, I think it often gets overlooked by a lot of players, but it really is important. It informs everything in the way the game plays out in every game mode, right? Like having classes be fair and function well, and, you know, and be balanced is very important. Being able to play the profession and the builds you want to accomplish content and goals that you have in the game is really important, right? You know? I don't know. But that's basically it, guys. That is me going over the balance notes that have come through. That's going to be a fun one. Okay, it's a pretty meaty video, but don't worry. I'm going to have Journa edit it down and cut out all the parts that I said in other videos. It's going to be great, guys, okay? He's going to be working overtime on that one. Yeah. If you're on YouTube, leave me a comment, okay? Tell me, gamers, let's get some proper discussion going. Let's go. Join my Discord, discord.gg/teapot, and let's talk about it. That's the new Tea Time Discord, by the way. New Tea Time Discord, where you can basically be Tea Time. Discord.gg/teapot. Get in there, guys. Let's fucking go. Join now. Go, 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 go. Go, 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 go.